So this is Comp SC 142, and I don't start a class until 10 after, which I don't know if it's the rule here, but at City College that's the rule. And I spend the first 10 minutes talking about the news for that reason. I also record everything that goes on in class. You do not need to attend physically. You can connect remotely by Twitch for a live stream, or you can watch YouTube videos later if you want to. Although everybody's welcome, and I'll be here. Anyway, so I got a few news articles that caught my attention. This was kind of interesting. This gang in Germany been robbing ATMs the old-fashioned way with apparently dynamite, solid explosives, just blowing them up, which is a low-tech solution. They got caught. Google's AI has now become more accurate at predicting storms than any known model. The current models based on physics are here, and the one at the bottom in red is Google AI. So that's very impressive. Also AIs are now considered more to be better at detecting things like cancer from X-rays and such. Well, I went for the doctor and I had an ultrasound, and man, I couldn't see anything. It was like totally washed out, cloudy, blurry stuff. I'm amazed they could see anything in that, and AIs help. Anyway, so CISA still has some of their previous mission, although much of it has been shut down by the Trump administration. But they are monitoring exploited flaws. And so they're warning of a Git code execution flaw, which is really important because, as you probably know, everybody uses Git. They use GitLab, GitHub, or Bitbucket to keep track of their stuff. And this is a high severity score vulnerability because it doesn't handle carriage returns and configuration files correctly. This kind of thing keeps happening over and over and over. And so you can cause it to execute code on the server. So you got to update your Git to the latest version. At least there's a patch. Sometimes there are vulnerabilities that are disclosed and there is no patch available. They call those 0 days, and those are of course the most dangerous because there's not much you can do. This is the normal kind where all you have to do is update your stuff. So legal botnets are interesting, and this started because a guy on Reddit claimed he was working in security at a company and he was being paid $250 a month to host a bunch of laptops with their own DSL connection in his house, and had been doing that for years, and said, boy, that money is sure coming in handy. And of course, everybody yelled at him and said, dude, you're probably assisting in a crime and you're going to get blamed for it. Some woman just got about 10 years in prison for doing this. She had a whole farm of laptops. It was all being used by North Koreans pretending to be Americans to get jobs at companies, which they would then steal the inside data from the company and send the money to North Korea. It's a big deal. And if they're not doing that, they're doing something else rotten. They wouldn't be paying you otherwise unless there was some kind of crime going on. But there's a lot of that going on, so they call this legal botnets. People rent out their internet connection or install another one at home so somebody can have an American IP address to do something. And the person renting it can claim, I didn't know they were doing anything bad. And I guess we'll see how well that holds up in court. I'm sure the prosecutor will say, it's pretty obvious they were doing something bad, but that's what'll happen in court. Let me see if I can get past this stuff. Well, all right. All right, I'll let that one load while we go. So if you get involved with federal government work, which I am more and more, I'm a consultant for a critical infrastructure company, and they wanted security advice from me, and I rapidly caught on, they don't want my opinion. They want me to back everything up with federal documents, documenting it, so I have some weight to it. So the federal government has standards for every kind of security, and one of the big ones is FedRAMP, and they're so anxious to get AI chatbots in the federal government that they're putting them at the front of the queue and have a special accelerated process, which is a leftover thing from the Biden administration, to try to quickly approve them and get them into the federal government. This is a highly questionable move because large language models are extremely insecure, and there is no known way to secure them. They all suffer from command injection flaws. The data that comes from the user cannot be distinguished from instructions that came from the administrator. And that is a serious problem, and there is currently no good solution for that. Anyway, so you can easily trick them into doing things that violate their security boundaries. But everybody is rushing into it in the belief that they'll save a ton of money by implementing these things at companies, although a study came out from MIT last week that said that 95% of the companies that deployed large language models did not benefit from them as they had hoped to, which anybody could tell her. I teach a course in AI security. We set these things up. You see, once you understand how they work, you'll understand how they're not easy to use. The fundamental issue is they don't understand anything in the question and they don't understand anything in the answer. They're just doing a mathematical computation to predict words, and people treat them like a human. Like they'll tell them do this thing, then they do it wrong. Then they say, you did it wrong. It'll say, I'm sorry, I won't do it again. Then it'll do it wrong again. Then you say, why did you do it wrong again? It says, well, it really won't. Then you'll do it wrong again because it never understood anything it was saying. If you complain, it just looks up, oh, the response to a complaint is say, gee, I'm sorry, I won't do it again. But it doesn't mean it. It doesn't know what the words mean. You have to understand you're not dealing with a human, but most people think they are. So anyway, I was very interested to read this. One of my students pointed this out. He had just come back from Israel, and he told me in Israel, 2 million people out of the 9 million people were out in the street protesting the genocide in Gaza, which is not the story you get from mainstream American media, because both the Democrats and the Republicans are totally sold into pro-genocide and pretending it's not happening. But this article is the first one I saw from that area that actually had a guy explaining how miserable people are. People really are happy in Israel. They really don't like what's going on. And what's happened there is the same thing that's happened here. A small far-right group has taken control of the government, and the fact that the majority of the people don't like it is just ignored. They're just barreling ahead with something that the people don't actually want. So anyway, so Florida had an order to shut down Alligator Alcatraz, which is the first concentration camp they set up for people that the Trump administration doesn't like. They accuse of being illegal immigrants, although some of them are American citizens or other groups. And they lock them in there, and the conditions are apparently terrible, and they've been ordered to shut it down, and Florida has just refused the order. Trump also completely ignored the order to not send people to El Salvador. They took off with the plane after they'd been explicitly ordered by a federal court not to. He hasn't yet explicitly disobeyed the Supreme Court, which may not happen because the Supreme Court is pretty much in Trump's pocket. But anyway, this is the kind of stuff that happened before the Civil War, when you just completely ignore the authorities, completely ignore the courts, because you don't recognize them. And I think we'll see a lot more of this as we get up to the 26 and 28 elections. A lot more bold actions. And so now we've been talking about firing the chairman of the Fed for a while. Now he's actually announced that he fired somebody on the Fed board because he wants to control the monetary policy. Now, the entire American system is designed to prevent this, which is why the dollar is the reserve currency of the world. The president cannot control the monetary policy. In nations where he can, like Venezuela, you have worthless money and an 80% inflation rate, because he just devalues the money and changes the policy. And he's trying to do it here. However, this woman has refused to leave her job and said, you don't have the right to fire me, I'm not leaving. So we have another standoff there. And this is, we're living in exciting times. I recommend paying attention to politics. Your children and grandchildren will be asking about it. This is the really pivotal time in the American experiment when it faces a really severe test. And which, however it comes out, there are going to be a lot of PhD theses and books written about this time, and people will be interested in what you noticed living through it. I didn't care about politics 10 years ago, but it became fascinating when Trump got in there. So how could this happen? 10 years ago, I remember talking to a student in my office, and I told him there's only 1% Nazis in America, and they could never gain power. And now we are under Nazi rule. I didn't think it could happen here. But it does help me understand the Germans. I always wondered, the Germans I knew were enlightened, wise, educated people. I said, how could they possibly have done something so terrible because it could never happen here? Well, now I understand how it happens. Anyway, so that's all the news I wanted to talk about.